I'm Landon Brooks with HeartLands Conservancy. I am the Communications and Engagement Manager. So part of my role is helping coordinate events, doing things like webinars. I also run our Conservation at Home program. I put together the native plant sales that we have and all that kind of good stuff, just assisting everybody with their communications needs in our organization. So tonight, just to kind of give you an idea, HeartLands Conservancy, we've been focusing on the topic of water for June and July and August. That's one of our major focuses. We are trying to get people involved with activities that help them understand the importance of water quality and how that all shakes out in the ecosystem. We've been doing events like Discover a Pond, Discover a Wetland, Discover a River. And so part of the work that we do with water is managing watersheds. So what we thought we would do for this webinar for June is talk to Tyler Burke, who's our water programs manager, and Mark Rosen with the City of Highland, and talk to them about some of the projects that we've been working on with them. And then also talking in general about maintaining water quality. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tyler Burke. He does have a presentation for us, and he's going to talk about the grand scheme of things. And then we will talk with Mark about the City of Highland and how Highland Silver Lake is such an important resource for their community. So Tyler.
Thanks, Landon. Like Landon said, my name's Tyler Burke, Water Programs Manager with HeartLands Conservancy. I've been here almost 2 years now, working on what the title of the project is. My main job is to create watershed plans and then use those plans to get funding and apply for grants and implement best management practices. So what are those? Those are, practices that help reduce erosion, prevent flooding, help Highland Silver Lake manage help Highland manage Silver Lake and keep that water source to functioning for all the residents. That's a critical area. So today we're going to talk about what is a watershed, why we plan using a watershed scale and actually the scale that we use. And then kind of go through what our watershed plans look like, what they entail with the water resource inventory, with our goals and our measurable actions, sources of funding, schedule and monitoring. And then we'll talk with Mark Rosen about some of the actions that they've done to help protect their lake, and then look at a few before and after pictures of some best management practices that we just recently installed using the Illinois EPA 319 grant, as well as funding from the City of Highland, which has been crucial to get a ton of projects installed and help improve the watershed and help protect that valuable resource.
And just to let everybody know, we do have a before and after video that we shot out at Highland Silver Lake. In the follow-up email with the presentation and the recording of this video, we will also include a link to that. So that's pretty cool. We actually walk you through the site itself, and I have to say that what an amazing transformation it really is. So I was able to shoot both of the videos, and I was blown away. So
yeah, thanks, Nate. So there will be some, we talked about that project as well in this webinar. So yeah, it'll be good if you'll see some pictures of the before and after, but the video and actually going to see it yourself and walking the trail and actually just experiencing Silver Lake Park I haven't been there until I started working at Heartlands, and man, it's an incredible park. It's really a valuable resource that Highland has.
Yeah, and it's actually going to be on our Jingle Hike Challenge this year. So if you're a jingle hiker, you're going to be forced to see it.
Excellent.
Thanks, Landon. So going into watershed planning, what is a watershed? So the definition is an area of land that drains water to a specific location or water body. So the visual we always like to use is think of a bathtub. When any drop of water hits within that bathtub, eventually it flows to the lowest point, obviously the drain, and then flows on from there. So a watershed it encompasses, the land use, how much water goes into a certain area and flows into, in our case, mainly Mississippi rivers where our water eventually goes to, and then the Gulf of Mexico. For the City of Highland, their watershed goes to their main sources. It's the Highland, so it's the Silver Lake. All the water that falls in the watershed that we look at goes to that lake. So any kind of pollutant that is in the watershed, or whether that's sediment or runoff from farm fields or oil from cars or anything, that water eventually makes its way to the lake. So protecting and enhancing a watershed takes a ton of work and a lot of partnership to manage it, but the scale that we do it on makes it a lot easier, and we've been very successful with how we've managed our watershed plans. So like I said, they can be scaled to as large as the Mississippi River, which drains 40% of the United States. 40% of the water in the United States goes to the Mississippi River, whether or not if it's taken up by plants or evaporated, but the area is the third largest watershed in the world. So it's a very unique watershed, mainly agricultural area, but that's the biggest for United States. So a watershed can be massive or it can be small, like you see on this picture on the right with the purple. This is a portion of the Highland Silver Lake watershed. So the area it kind of cuts off at the bottom, but you can see the Silver Lake at the bottom here in blue. So all of this water drains to Silver Lake eventually. But we even narrow it down even to a further scale, which we call HUC 14, which HUC means hydrologic unit code. It's how the United States Geological Survey codes their watersheds. So the more numbers, the smaller watershed. So the Mississippi River has a hydrologic unit code of 4 numbers. So it's a HUC 4. These purple boundaries are a HUC 14. So they're about as small as people typically get to study. They're roughly 1,000 acres or so. Maybe, between 800 to 4,000 acres with an average in the 1,000 to 2,000 range. So that lets us pinpoint exact information of where the issues are going on in those small watersheds, so we can analyze and look at the issues, come up with solutions that'll help the larger watershed of Highland Silver Lake, which will eventually help the larger watershed, which is the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico, where all the water eventually leads to. So what has HeartLands Conservancy done watershed planning wise? As you can see the list, we've actually been very active in performing watershed plans in southwestern Illinois. Most of them have been in Madison County, but we're stretching into St. Clair with some additional. So, going down the list, Wood River, Piesaw Creek, and American Bottom, 2020 was extremely busy. We got all of those completed and approved. For Indian Creek and Koki Creek, we actually got, for Canteen Koki Creek, we completed it and received funding to do 319 projects. We're in the middle of doing that. So for any of you out there who are interested in installing BMPs and you live in this purple region right here, Canteen, Koki Creek, the Collinsville, Edwardsville, Glen Carbon, please reach out. We have funding available for reimbursement funding for you if you're interested. And then the 3 newer ones is Prairie DuPont, which is in St. Clair County. This is an area that has been underserved and will be a very critical watershed. But also we partnered with the City of Highland to update their watershed plan for Highland Silver Lake. So we are working on that now. We're going to finish that by the end of 2021. And so the City of Highland has had a watershed plan, and that's how we've received funding before. But it's approximately 10 years old, and every 10 years or so, the EPA likes you to update your watershed plan, because a lot happens in 10 years, whether you implement projects, whether conditions get worse or land use changes. So they like to have them updated every 10 years. So the City of Highland has partnered with HeartLands Conservancy to update their plan. And once finished, we will go reach out for additional funding like we have right now with our 319 grant. So like I said, why do we do our planning on a watershed scale? It's an easily defined area. So they range from about 30,000 acres, like 30,000 is about what Highland Silver Lake is. Prairie du Pont is, it's combined with Judy's Branch, so that's almost 100,000 acres, but it sounds like a lot, but that defined area helps us focus in on problems that are unique to that watershed. For Highland Silver Lake, that's rural community, that's rural areas, helping farmers implement best management practice in their fields. For our Prairie du Pont, which is the East St. Louis, Belleville area, that's a more urban area. So we're looking at more detention basins and urban tree planting, and then looking at some other kind of flooding conditions more than in Highland Silver Lake, where it's more of an erosion issue. So we identify these existing conditions, like I just mentioned, and then the scale that we look at is manageable for all the local stakeholders, whether like taking for the City of Highland, they can look at the plan and manage it based on their, they don't have a huge budget to manage their watershed, but it's manageable to a size for them to be able to work with. So everything's geared towards using local knowledge to help manage and implement whatever we come up with. And holistically, we look at everything. We don't try to just band-aid one portion. We look at trying to come up with, whether it's put cover crops in the farm to capture water, and then grassed waterways to slow the water down, and then shoreline stabilization to make sure the Highland Silver Lake shoreline doesn't, fall into the lake, reducing its capacity. So we look at every scenario that is and influences that watershed and come up with a plan for everything, and not just little band-aids here and there. I like to say HeartLands is experts at creating the plans, but we're not experts of every watershed. So resident input is critical, and the residents have building a stake with them, and they have, most people in this area really love where they live and they want to protect that area. So they want to, it's usually pretty easy to get residents to talk about if they have flooding or if they have erosion issues, or if they're, they have something going on in their farmland. They want help with trying to come up with solutions, and most have been very active of trying to provide input of where their issues are. And then that input is very, very critical for getting future funding, because the Illinois EPA loves when the residents come out and participate. That makes them very happy, and it's very makes it easier for them to allocate funds when they know that the whole community is involved and not just one company or one city like Highland. And so like the City of Highland, it's easily adjustable over time. So we look at it every 10 years. The plan doesn't have to be completely overhauled, but we look at what's done. We look at how things are progressing, and we can make changes as necessary as we see things are going. Say there's just for some reason a large influx of sediment coming in, then we really focus on that, or flooding has happened more because of maybe there's more urban sprawl and causing more flooding. So we hone in on that. So it's easily adjustable over time. And the main reason that we do these watershed plans is to get funding. So if Highland Silver Lake didn't have a watershed plan, they would very likely not get a 319 grant. So the 319 grant is a non-point source pollution prevention grant, which uses funds from the Illinois EPA to reimburse landowners for implementing best management practices. It's been very successful in Highland Silver Lake because they had a plan and knew what direction they wanted to go. Without that plan, they don't get funding. So these plans are critical to getting additional funding from federal money or state money for grants to help improve everyone's area. So a watershed plan follows guidelines set by the EPA, the federal EPA, and there is the 6 steps and 9 elements. So I mentioned kind of the steps with the partnerships, characterizing the area, So one is goals and solutions. We come up with we use the residents, we use community leaders, municipalities to come up with what they want to see and what they know is an acceptable solution for those goals that they are fine with implementing and want to implement, because we need match money to implement solutions. So that whether that comes from a landowner or a municipality, we have to plan in what everyone likes and can agree upon to do in the future. And that rolls into the implementation program. And then that's where the implementation program, that's kind of where the plan stops. And then you go into actually implement and then measure your progress and then adjust. So within those steps, we have these 9 elements that every plan, the Illinois EPA reviews all of our plans to make sure these 9 elements are in it. And we go through this real, basic, what's our main causes and sources of pollutants? What are we trying to shoot for? How are we trying to reduce those pollutants into, say, Silver Lake? And the Illinois nutrient reduction plan shoots for like 25% reduction in sediment. So we discuss is that, is that our goal? Is that an achievable goal? Should we go higher? Or, we would like to meet that goal. Should we go a little higher if we can, type of thing. Measure how do we achieve those goals, and then come up with a schedule of when we implement, and then have milestones. Say we want to add 20 grass waterways in 10 years, but let's try to get 7 or 8 every year if we can, and beat that 20. And so that we have milestones every we try to hit something every year, and then we kind of go to 5 years and then 10 years, and then after 10 years we like to try to evaluate the entire plan and maybe make updates from there. And most have a monitoring portion where they track how well, say, Silver Lake, so they can track how to measure the water quality of the lake and seeing how much these best management practices are improving the lake and if they match what we believe is going on. And then there's education, which is what we're doing now. We're trying to get the word out to people to say, discuss watershed planning, show individuals, like using a watershed table to show how water flows, what changes that might have using say a grass waterway, and getting the word out to not only adults, but children to get them involved and get them interested. And then the all-important financial assistance is we have a whole potential grant applications that we try to go for and that maybe cities can go for to get money to implement the plan. Pardon me. So the meat and potatoes of the watershed plan is the water resource inventory. It houses all of the data. It has extensive mapping, probably close to 200 pages long, and it just, I'm not sure anyone would ever want to read through the whole thing, but it has every piece of information about the watershed that you could possibly think of, such as the climate of the area, how many wells are there, what are the demographics. We try to highlight pollutant load analysis using what's called a stepple load, which analyzes sediment, phosphorus, and nitrogen in the watershed and where it's coming from, how much from, say, gullies or stream banks or a shoreline. We come up with those math to come up with those numbers. We look at past projects, such as Highland Silver Lake. They've implemented a ton of past projects, and the all-important land use and land cover, and it changes over time. So it's a very extensive document. And these are some of the maps that we come up with. We have an incredible GIS employee who works for HeartLands. Her name's Jenny Raymond, and she makes some beautiful maps. So this is kind of a preview for Mark Rosen as well. This is what's going into his plan that we're completing. So these shows the erodible soils that are in the watershed. We have our past projects on the bottom right. It shows where the prime farmland is located. So we use these, a lot of people are more visual learners than reading. I think I prefer to look at maps than words all day. So these really help get the message out of what is going on in the watershed. And helps us if we can overlay these layers and pinpoint some critical areas, which I'll discuss in a little bit. And here's the step analysis, the spreadsheet tool for estimating pollutant loads. So we break this down by the HUC 14 level, and we enter data to come up with, this shows BOD and E. coli. We tend to focus more on nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. But it comes up with detailed numbers for estimating how much pollutant is running off from the watershed. So it looks at the area, it looks at the land use, it looks at how much it takes the local weather conditions and comes up with an average of what we believe is running off from, say, farm fields or from stream banks. And we also use field analysis, doing stream inventories and shoreline inventories, like myself and Mike Andrews did for Silver Lake, and it runs all those numbers to come up with loads for the area, and then we use those numbers, those estimated numbers, to come up with what we want to try to reduce to meet the goals which we talked about earlier. So I mentioned the residents is critically important for their input. So this is the survey that we sent out to mainly farmers in the Silver Lake watershed. It's pretty much residents of 5 acres or larger, to have them say, what's going on in their area. Are you having erosion? Do you have any flooding or log jams, or lack of drainage? And then also, have you implemented any best management practices? Do you do cover crops? Do you have grass waterways? Are you interested in wetlands? So we send this out and hopeful, we hope that we can get decent responses from everyone, because it helps our planning process. But yeah, we do these with every watershed plan, and this one's geared more towards the rural areas, but we can shift gears towards more urban area and ask about, say, sewage issues. Sometimes we bring it up because can be caused by actually stormwater infiltrating into sewage pipes and then overwhelming the sewer and causing backup issues, such as in the Prairie du Pond area. So this might be tough to read, but these are kind of our goals or objectives. So we haven't completed these for the Highland Silver Lake watershed yet. So these are borrowed from the Wood River watershed. So our goals were, improve surface water quality. And so we used the Illinois Nutrient Reduction Plan of 20% reduction in sediment, 25% reduction in phosphorus, and 15% in nitrogen. And then we use those goals to base what BMPs we want to implement to meet those goals. So that's when we come up with 10,000 acres of grass waterways, or we come up with numbers that we believe fit to the plan and can actually meet those goals, and then we try to implement every couple of years and make sure that that's moving forward. And so on the right here, you can see that for the Wood River watershed, we're shooting to reduce 400 pounds of or 4,000 pounds of phosphorus a year, and almost 17,000 tons of sediment, which is a lot. So these are lofty goals. These are things that are tough to strive for, but it sets something to get the wheels in motion. It might not be achievable by 2035 without proper funding, but we like to put it on this list to get people interested and get people motivated to fund these projects. So like I mentioned before, these critical areas, we use all of the information on the left here to come up with what we believe to be the critical areas. So on our right here, this is the Wood River watershed. And these are the areas that we came up with as critical, like the greens, critical logjam areas, critical riparian areas, critical wetlands. So when we say critical, we mean these are areas that we believe should be addressed first if funding becomes available. So in this watershed, there's a ton of log jams, and they need to be, that causes flooding upstream and also causes erosion in the stream banks. So addressing those and preventing log jams, we thought would be a good first step to improving the streams, which helps the rest of the watershed. We also, in these little purple areas, we highlight, we highlight these critical wetland areas that will help, that are typically in agricultural areas, and we use data to come up with those areas using the ACPF framework, which is a GIS system, to come up with those areas to help remove nutrients and also prevent flooding. So we come up with these maps for every watershed for critical areas, and they're unique to each one. So how do we address those critical areas? Is we come up with best management practices. So here's a list of urban practices that we would use in an area more like the Prairie du Pont watershed, of porous pavement, street sweeping. Urban tree planting is one that we have in Canteen Coquia that we are trying to promote. Trees absorb a large amount of water and capture that. As the rainwater hits the tree, it prevents that erosion from that first drop hitting just the bare soil. So we're trying to implement some of these projects in Prairie du Pont as well. So here's just some visuals. You can see on the top left, this is a bioswale. This is up by Engrek, I believe. I might be off on the location, but you can see that it widens these gullies, which would cause erosion, and allows the water to spread out and slow down. In the porous pavement, you can kind of see the difference between regular pavement on the right and how it filters through this porous pavement in a fashion that actually slows the water down and prevents runoff. And then what local landowners can do is these beautiful rain gardens that we are helping design in Canteen as well, that helps capture the runoff from the roofs of homes, and lets it slowly filter through. And then it's also allows for beautiful native plants and not just turf grass everywhere. I know they're Landon's favorites, I believe. So more towards the agricultural areas and the stuff that we've implemented in Highland is we've done some water and sediment control basins. We've done grass waterways. Haven't done too many bioreactors yet, and we've really tried to strongly promote cover crops. It's usually like the first line of defense to prevent erosion, so we really try to push for those. Here's just some photos that we've had before. The water and sediment control basins, those act as little kind of check dams that are placed in between a sloped agricultural area that has traditional gullies. So it captures the water, lets it store up for a designed amount of time, and slowly releases down. And usually they're staged downstream. And you can see some cover crops down here, a demonstration cover crop. And another one in the Highland Silver Lake area is this beautiful grass waterway. So this would be a huge gully. Some of these get to multiple feet deep, and we slope these down in a parabolic shape, sometimes putting a drainage tile underneath it to allow the tiled water from the ground to come through the tile and outlet in a more controlled fashion. So there'd be water actually above ground and below ground flowing at the same time to a place that stores it for a set amount of time and then slowly releases. So to come up with locations of those agricultural practices, we use this, what I mentioned before, this ACPF, Agricultural Conservation Planning Framework, GIS system. It uses a lot of land use data and slopes and potential rainfall to come up with areas where grass waterways could be implemented. And you can see in the Silver Lake watershed, it's almost everywhere. They're pretty extensive. And, the shading, they're blown up so you can see them, but there's a ton of grass waterways that can be done. It also looks at stream bank stabilization sites and shoreline, as you can see around the shoreline here. This is all estimates and generalized, so some of this may have been done already, but that it gives an area of where they believe should be looked at, and it also gives recommendations on what type of species to plant as well. And then over here on the right is those water and sediment control basins. Not as extensive because you need a certain amount of slope, and this area is fairly flat. And then so finally, our final best management practice that we typically look at is lake and streams. So on the lake, you see a stream bank stabilization practice. This is Wayne Kenny, who just recently retired. He's showing off his armoring of a stream bank using riprap. In Highland Silver Lake, we have this was done recently to protect their shoreline as well from waves eroding away the shoreline. And there's just another demonstrative practice here on the bottom. And here's those, what I mentioned before, those management measures that we looked at, of what we believe needs to be implemented to meet those reductions here on the bottom of 20% reduction in sediment. So that can be something along the lines of 1,000 square feet of bioswales in an urban area to 17,000 acres of cover crops, which we think should be installed to help reduce, quite a bit of sediment. And the final thing that we like to implement in our watershed projects or watershed plans is site-specific locations. So we use those critical information, the critical areas, and actually mainly knowledge from the residents of what's the worst of the worst area that we need to really hit, and is it in and what conditions that in. So for the Wood River watershed, there's this area in Godfrey that has been historically flooding and has sanitary sewer overflow as well. So we try to get 15 or so of these projects that to try to provide the EPA to show that we know what we want to do once we receive money. We have exact locations. We have details of what we would like to do to solve it, and potentially funding as well. So that's pretty much that's in a short version of what all goes involved in this typically 400-page document for a watershed plan. So next we'll bring Mark Rosen in and start talking more about the Highland Silver Lake and what has been installed there and what Highland's doing to protect their valuable resource that is the beautiful Silver Lake.
All right,
So
well, thank you.
just kind of describing what you guys have been involved in and what's your, describe your valuable resource there.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tyler. And I also want to thank you and Landon for the nice comments about Silver Lake and Silver Lake Park. We've been very fortunate to partner with HeartLands Conservancy. They've been fantastic partners, holding our hand, guiding us, kind of demonstrating what we should be doing, what could be put off. But the real key was getting buy-in from the landowners. And without them, a lot of the things that we've done weren't necessarily for naught, but basically enhance what we've been doing. So the picture you see right there is a new pond that is right at the entrance to the Silver Lake Trail. It's about 1.5 acre, 2 acre pond. It collects water from the east and basically just holds it, and before discharging into Silver Lake. So the nice thing about this lake is that it's doubling as a fish rearing pond. So we've been working with Fred Cronin from the fisheries department to develop a plan. We've introduced a couple of thousand minnows already as a food source. And if they I think this week they'll be putting in the bass. We're gonna let them brood in there until fall, and then they'll be released through a valve on the backside of the dam. So that was one project one of the two projects in the same project, if that makes sense, because just directly to the right of this picture is a wetland.
Yeah, Mark.
And that collects another.
Sorry to cut you off, but
Okay.
I do have some before. So here's some before. No, I should have prepped or served that one up a little better for you. But yeah, so here's some befores of the pond as well. So you saw that after, but here's some befores. So I guess what was going in? Who came up with this clever idea? This seems
I kind of like Parks and Recs copies and paste from a lot of other places, so I had to take a little credit for this. But when we toured Taylorville Lake probably 20 years ago at least, they had these throughout their watershed and adjacent to lakes. And I just thought that even though the watershed is relatively flat, the Silver Lake Park north to the headwaters has a little bit of terrain, and I just thought it would be a great place to do this, and plus the accessibility for trucks to dump the fish in, as well as the equipment, because there is a lot of limitations as far as accessing property around the lake. So, but yeah, and actually before this, we probably unfortunately removed about 40 to 60 really good, healthy trees. But for the most part, it was scrub brush, lots of honeysuckle, Russian autumn olive. So in a sense, we've enhanced that portion as well. So it's been well received. People are just flocking to the site. And we were very fortunate. I don't know if this is in any of the photos coming ahead, but we were able to unearth boulders that were just phenomenal and really added to the entire project. And it was nice, in Parks and Rec, we reduce, we reuse and we recycle. And those are the boulders right there that we pulled out. And I mean, we saved thousands and thousands of dollars, I think, in being able to keep those on site. So it's definitely gonna be a destination for senior pictures and prom pictures and things like that. So, but this is the bridge that goes over the wetland, and it's basically the secondary portion of the pond. So the water that, heavy rain events, the water will cascade into this wetland and then percolate down those boulders. So yeah, and you can see it right there on the just above below the houses and above those people walking. So
Right.
it's just been created a whole new interest in the trail. And after COVID, people have discovered Silver Lake Trail, and it's become popular and staying popular. So we're very grateful for that. So
It's beautiful. It really is. I mean, I think those pictures don't really even give it those boulders justice.
Yeah.
And if you saw the promotion for this webinar, I used Tyler Right by the Rocks to kind of show you scale and just how pretty the rocks are.
Yeah. We did have Conan Concrete Products make that bridge for us, and it's sturdy enough to drive relatively heavy equipment like a skid steer over it. I was telling Landon and Tyler, my only regret with that bridge is that we didn't imprint deer tracks and turkey tracks and different paw prints and things of the wildlife around there. I think that would have, and there again, copying what the zoo did, St. Louis Zoo. So I'm just thrilled about it. It's awesome, and look forward to more projects. But we also were able to, and I don't know if you want me to go on, Tyler.
Yeah, we'll set you up for the shoreline. How about?
Okay.
Can I say
All right.
one thing? I think we missed this. If you go back a picture, Tyler. Yes. Okay. So that was the one.
This one?
No, the other one. So that little gray area, you see, and right almost in the center of the photo, that's where the fish from the pond up the hill will be released out at. And I thought that was really, really cool when I was there, because I actually had the opportunity to see it like kind of right towards the middle maybe of construction. And it just blows me away that's how that all works. That up the hill is the pond that keeps the fish. And then in the fall, they're just gonna let them swim out into the lake. And then I had a question for you, Mark, about that. Will that allow for more people to, do you guys allow fishing in your lake to keep, or is it catch and release?
Yeah.
Only?
No, we have encouraged the boating, the fishing, and there again, this gives a little bit more access to the lake because it is so limited on access. But yeah, people are welcome to go out there and fish. Boating requires a boat sticker, boat permit from the city. Kayaks require the same, but yeah, I'm really trying to promote more and more water recreation. That's, although the lake was built strictly for a water supply after the drought in '54, this is just, I see 550 acres of water space, and I think that everybody should be on the lake at some point throughout the year. So
yeah, it's really, it's a great place. And I will have to say it's well taken care of, and it's just clean.
yeah.
So I told Mark, I don't know if anybody's been to Lake Lou Yeager, but this is like right up there with it. And as far as I'm concerned, they're two of the nicest lakes in Southern Illinois.
That, but but yeah, I give a lot of credit to staff. Ryan Hummert joined us about 13 years ago and has been a huge part of maintaining that 90 acres, as well as the numerous people that we've had mowing out there throughout the years. So, but thank you for that.
So to keep that, how we're trying to, that's the whole goal of these plans, is to keep this lake beautiful and keep it clean. And one of those ways that Highland partnered with, Heartlands and Highland partnered together with, is to construct these very important shoreline stabilization projects. So Mark, that.
Sure. Just north of the interstate, there was basically a peninsula that went out a couple hundred feet from the main shoreline. And in the last 20 years, that peninsula kept getting more and more narrow. So right before, well, I guess right when Heartland started, getting on board, this is what that peninsula looked like, or what was left of it. So this is the very western portion of that peninsula that was maybe 1.5 feet deep in between the land and this island. So we used some of the money to riprap and recreate a peninsula with the grant money, and it's kind of works also as a jetty where it's slowing that water down from those large rain events. So, and obviously this is throughout the lake with that high bank erosion. So, but yeah, I don't.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so it's turned out really nice. I know the anglers really like it. A lot of the fish like to lurk in those areas. So it just really enhances the lake. Obviously, it'll get the more vegetation going, and also the aquatic life, the different species in the water. So, but yeah, we did a few of these riprap projects, and Dreezy did that work for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So and the northern part of the lake has historically been filling with sediment more and more, just runoff from various areas, and so keeping the shoreline stabilized, and that is that's an obvious 100% direct input to the lake. So it helps keep that lake accessible to boaters, as in it's gotten a little shallow over time.
Yeah, go ahead, Landon.
Have you used any native plants in addition to this riprap for stream bank stabilization?
No, we haven't introduced anything anyhow. We're basically just letting nature take its course. The one area that I am interested in introducing something that might be a little more unique would be that wetland that was just recently put in. So I've actually asked our tree commission to do a little homework over the summer and come up with some ideas that might be suitable for that as well. But Landon, I would be willing to take any advice from you too. So,
well, if you want some buttonbush, we have some buttonbush you can probably.
Okay.
So.
All right. I guess that's not an invasive, right?
No, that's a native. It's a really cool looking native. But
Okay.
I was talking with our conservation manager the other day, and we had gotten some buttonbush, and we still have some left over that she's managing. So I don't know. But that's a really nice one that you can get like pretty cheap bare root, and so she's just been kind of growing it out.
Okay. All right.
So those are the three big projects that the City of Highland has done through this recent 319 grant proposal, but there has been some past projects that Highland has done as well, such as like keeping cattle out of the lake, and
yeah,
if you want to go through those real
quick. Well, when the lake was built, it was in the original contract that the landowners would have watering rights to the lake. Obviously, since 1962, a lot has changed. So rather than having the cattle in the water, waiting in the water, we built 2 ponds for landowners over the years, and now there are no direct contact into the lake. So it's hard to believe, but the sad thing is that there are still remnants of that use, that the cows went down, and the high banks and things like that. So just another area that we can put on the list for the comprehensive plan.
Mhm.
But it is nice at the same time that, you know, some of the vegetation has been started back. So,
Right. Well, thanks,
It's so
Mark.
nice to see a really
Yeah.
well thought out property, you know, like with the park and the water and the concern for the watershed as a whole. I just think I just have to applaud the City of Highland for doing all of that. It's really nice. You
Yeah.
guys,
yeah,
you know, didn't just dig a hole and put some water in it or something like that. Like it's nice.
right. You know, all the Monday morning quarterbacks were, you know, come and tell me, well, we told the city they needed a bigger lake, they need to do this, they need to do that. It's like, you know, we can dwell on the past, but this is what we have now. And let's just fix what we have. And then the debate was, well, we need to dredge the lake. Well, that's not really feasible to dredge the lake anymore. So my feeling was that, well, we know that there's pollutants coming in. Why don't we address that first? And then we can go back and dredge or do a project similar and rat hole some money and go that route. But we have to fix the problems, I think, before we just start digging the bottom out. So, and I do need to, you know, compliment the former city manager and the late mayor, Joe Michaelis, for finally buying into this and realizing how valuable our water supply is. And I think it takes a boat ride up there to the north end for the city council to understand how dire that portion of the lake is, because I think we've lost over 30% of our water capacity in the, probably more in the last, you know, 50 years, 60 years, actually.
Mhm.
So,
Wow.
Yeah, and with the new plan, we're actually doing a study to come up with how much we've lost now. So it'll get a more accurate survey coming up soon. I think they just completed that within the last month.
yep. Yep. All right.
I find this all very interesting. And Tyler, I liked your comments about Jenny's maps. Those were really,
Oh
really
yeah, yeah. She's a GIS wizard.
yeah.
Yeah. So we do have a couple more. I just want to fly through a few more BMPs that actually the City of Highland helped fund. They gave up some additional money to help landowners fund some stuff. So just flying through real quickly, I talked about grass waterways a lot. This is what a huge gully in a field looks like. This is common throughout. These are, you can see the truck for scale. These could be every bit of 4 to 5 feet deep. And this is another one, huge gully. It's pretty common, not just in the Silver Lake watershed, but just in the agricultural area that we live in, and just kind of the nature of some agricultural practices. Don't want to blame the farmers, but of what they're doing, but there's some improvements they can do to keep the sediment on their field and actually help their crops. Just another before picture, but so this is what I was talking about. They actually put tiles underneath the waterways to help the tiled fields drain and prevent erosion as well. And here's a constructed one, not yet the grass isn't growing up on it yet, but you can kind of see that parabolic shape. It's nice and smooth. It goes nice and slow. Doesn't erode away anything. Here's that outlet I was talking about. So the water comes down from the top of the page to the bottom and comes to this little outlet pool here and fills, and then there's an additional pipe that lets it fill up and flow out in a slow, manageable fashion. So these are very critical for keeping sediment in your field. The amount that they hold these grass waterways reduce so much sediment from getting into the Silver Lake. So these are all done in Silver Lake, all funded by this recent project. And this is a real nice, this is after one of the pictures before, and how nice and smooth everything looks and green, and keeping the plowed field at a distance away so the water doesn't rush into it at a huge velocity. And here's another final picture where it just really, it really looks nice too. It's aesthetically pleasing to look at a nice green area between two fields, and the benefits, how valuable they are is just, it's really, you can't put in words how critical some of these grass waterways are.
Right.
Yeah, so keep going along just because we're kind of running low on time. So this is what I was mentioned before, these water and sediment control basins is a gully that forms right in the middle of that valley between two little hills and an agricultural field. Kind of hard to manage because a grass waterway wouldn't really work here. This is, you install these berm-like structures with that riser. You kind of barely see it. These are tough to show in pictures, but this is about a berm that you allow to drive a tractor across and still plant on, but it catches the water almost like a mini dam, holds it for a time being. Oh, sorry. And you can kind of see where the water was held for a little while and then slowly releases to prevent erosion. But these can be used, they used are, several in a row to help collect water, help prevent sediment from reaching streams and lakes. And they can be used with grass waterways as well to kind of make a whole system of controls throughout fields. So you can kind of see how the slope comes down. There's multiple of these water and sediment basins throughout. Still tough to see in photos, but very effective for slowing water and helping helping the crop. So here's one with a bunch of water in it, slowly releasing. You can see on the downslope, it's really slowing. You can see it slowly releasing out, but nothing like it would be if this all released during that rainstorm. The last one that we actually worked on was a pond. Nothing probably hasn't seen, but this is huge gully. This was about 8 feet deep, really washed out to the point where we didn't know what else to do other than put a pond in, which, a pond really gathers more sediment than anything. So implementing ponds, is nice for your home value, but it also acts as a very good sediment catch for, like the City of Highland put to that other pond next to their Silver Lake. These ones out in the watershed help immensely too. So you can see how kind of nasty and mucky this whole place was before, and then turn into this nice, beautiful pond.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So this can be used for cattle as well. The cattle can use this as a place for drinking water source. That I believe that, the City of Highland actually created a couple of these ponds a while ago for whenever they kept the cattle out of the Silver Lake. So I had numbers on a different PowerPoint that I wasn't able to get up, but so the City of Highland through this 319 grant with EPA and Heartlands, we prevented 4,400 tons of sediment, 4,000 pounds of nitrogen, and 2,500 pounds of phosphorus from reaching the lake. And that's every year. So that's one grant. These can be implemented. We're going to keep reaching for that. So it's substantial how much these practices has prevented sediment from reaching that critical water source for the City of Highland.
Very nice.
So that's all I have for today. We ran right up to that hour. So
does anybody have any questions that they want to ask? I mean, they covered a lot of stuff. I think it's really cool. It's really cool to see the whole project.
Yeah, before and afters really kind of provide a visual.
Oh, one participant said, no, this was great. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, guys, with that, thank you all for attending. And like I said, I'll send out an email with a video for the before and after, which will be really cool to see, to kind of get an idea of what a large project this was. Out at the north end of the lake. But with that, I guess we will end tonight's webinar. And if you do end up having questions later, feel free to email Tyler or me, and we will get you some answers.
Awesome.
The next webinar that we have is with Chris Benda, the Illinois botanizer, and we will be going over butterfly host plants. So that's really exciting. We can learn more about what to plant in your yard to bring your favorite butterflies. So anyway, everybody have a fantastic evening. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.